She is the curator of comics and cartoon art at the Billy Ireland Cartoon Library and Museum, an associate professor at Ohio State University. She is also the author of a wonderful new book that is long overdue in terms of biographies called, I love this title, Tell Me a Story Where the Bad Girl Wins, The Life and Art of Barbara Shermund. Coming to us from the great state of Ohio, Columbus, I believe, is Caitlin McGurk. Caitlin, welcome.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
You're quite welcome, and thank you for this great book. This is really the essence of what I think biographies are meant to do. I knew the name of Barbara, I knew a bit about her work, but after that, nothing. And to sit down and read about this remarkable, trailblazing, pioneering artist and woman just had me shaking my head at the stuff she was doing at a time when women cartoonists were non-existent and they were in a man's world. Tell our viewers a bit about this spectacular, spectacular woman.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it was, that's what hooked me on this project to begin with. So I've worked in the comics and cartoon art field for a long time. The library where I work is the largest collection of comics and cartoon art in the world. And when I discovered Barbara's work in our collection 13 years ago, I thought for certain it had to be from the 1960s or 70s. The jokes, the sensibility to it was so feminist, kind of queer, very forward thinking and biting. There were even, in it, jokes about or gags about things like mansplaining and stuff. So I'm thinking this is more contemporary work, and was shocked to discover that the pieces I was looking at were from the mid 1920s and the early 1930s. So Barbara was one of the first women to work for the New Yorker magazine, and started there the year it was founded in 1925. So we're just actually this year celebrating the magazine centennial.
It's remarkable too, and you just pegged it there, Caitlin, is that you have to take it into context. She's starting as a young woman cartoonist in New York in the mid-20s. Booze is still illegal. Women have just recently got the vote. And here she is, and right off the bat seeing, because the book is littered what you need with so many of her cartoons, and you also said it, that Barbara Shermund's women were smart, funny, they drank, they smoked, and I think this is the one takeaway, the main takeaway I take from your book, is that Barbara Shermund's women did not need men.
Right. That's quite frankly totally true. And, it's not that she wasn't ever poking fun at women of her ilk, too, because she totally was, but doing so in a loving way. And one of the things that I think is really remarkable about it, especially for the time period, is that her women were never, competing with each other. And the jokes were never cruel. They were always just really, really classy, really, really funny. Like I said, very ahead of their time, and commenting on the societies and trends and things that were going on around her, and continued to over the many, many decades that she worked. She was really an unbelievable pioneer, and not afraid to poke fun at things like domesticity or, having children, things like that. Like she was kind of the original child-free cat lady in a way of her era. So
yeah, I mean, again, going back to the time period, I mean, it's the flapper party era of F. Scott Fitzgerald, the 20s, but then you get into the 30s Depression, and as you said, there's so many cartoons where the young women are making, not cruelly as you said, but are making light of their mother's Victorian era. What's great too is that she just moves beautifully with the times, and I cannot emphasize how important it is that she's a woman in a man's world as one of the early cartoonists. But you get into World War II, where she really gets to the forefront and center stage with her work with Esquire and Hearst magazine and Collier's and again the New Yorker. And I wanted to talk to you because what's interesting is that the war ends, the soldiers come home, the suburbs are created, the baby boom begins, we get into the 50s, and everybody has seen the 50s television shows. Women return to the home, become housewives, mothers, and that's okay, but she all of a sudden is at odds with society.
That's absolutely right. Yeah. And she sort of becomes left behind. She's no longer even able to get her work published where she's written her own jokes. So in the world of cartooning, there is a very common thing of cartoonists working with what are called gag writers, the people who provide the captions or the jokes. But Barbara always wrote her own, and it was her voice that was really coming through strongly in those 1920s and 30s cartoons. But as you said, post World War II, there is such a deep desire for people to have this return to normalcy. And as a result of it, the type of perspective that Barbara had been bringing to the table was no longer wanted. In fact, she was actually told by editors that she should please stop submitting work that shows women smoking or drinking. Things like that were a complete taboo at this point. No mentions of divorce or psychiatry and things like that. So things radically change in the 40s and 50s, and her work kind of tapers off, and she falls out of the spotlight. And that was before people were doing a whole lot of scholarship and research into cartooning. So by the time that really became a trend, as it is now, there's a booming world of comics and cartoon art studies. She was a name that no one had ever heard of at that point. So this was really a reclamation project for me.
One of the interesting points of her life is toward the end, and it kind of brings you together with somebody, because I just found this astounding. She dies in the late 70s, but as you say, there was a newspaper strike in New York, so her death goes largely unreported. You pick it up from there and how you were part of the group that got her back to the West Coast.
Sure. So this book took me about 7 years to write, or 7 years to research, 5 years to write. And one of the things early on that I had been trying to figure out was, where was Barbara Shermund buried? I couldn't find any trace of a gravesite for her, so I could go and pay my respects. And something really miraculous happened early in my research that kind of changed the whole course of it. I had put up a blog post through the Billy Ireland Cartoon Library about my research into Barbara and how passionate I was about her and seeking any information anyone had. And a woman named Amanda Gormley reached out to me, who was a distant relative of Barbara Shermund's and was doing ancestry work into her family and learning more about her great Aunt Barbara. So Amanda contacted me after seeing my blog post, and she shared with me that she too had been trying to figure out where Barbara was buried. She had the really brilliant idea of calling around to different funeral homes and cemeteries in the area of New Jersey where we knew she had died in 1978, and had been told again and again that they had no trace of her. Finally got the John Flegger Funeral Home on the phone in New Monmouth, New Jersey, and they said, "Oh, Barbara? She's still here with us. She was cremated when she passed away in 1978. This phone call was occurring in 2014, and no one had ever picked her up. So her remains sat, in a can on a funeral home shelf for all of those decades." Amanda was able to claim the ashes, and I organized a GoFundMe to raise money to have a proper burial and grave marker placed for Barbara. Her mom had passed away in the 1918 influenza pandemic, which I have to say, it was very strange for me to be writing this book during the pandemic we experienced. And after her mom died, she was buried in an unmarked grave, like many were at that time during the flu. And so we buried Barbara alongside her mother in a cemetery in Colma, California, and added a grave marker for both of them to their site. And it was funded by cartoonists and artists and historians from all over the world who this story really resonated with. And we're glad to have a hand in helping to lay this artist to rest in the way she deserved to be.
That's great, actually, and thank you for taking the time to talk with us, Caitlin. I'm holding the book up right here, folks. It is called Tell Me a Story Where the Bad Girl Wins, The Life and Art of Barbara Shermund. If you are at all a fan of comics, cartoons, trailblazing women, this is a book you definitely want to pick up. Got to send out a big thanks to Tucker at fantagraphics.com, because I'm not talking to you without him. Thank you for joining us, Caitlin. I got to say, I'm not a Buckeyes fan of the football team, but it was great talking to you. Thank you.
My absolute pleasure. Yes, thanks for having me.
You bet. Cheers.